All right, your short little section of notes today is over section 2 of chapter 5 on climate. More specifically, we're going to talk about the influence of sunlight on climate. So this is something that we've actually covered before. It's not really that difficult. You already know it. If I have a generic Earth here, you know the reason why it's warmer at the equator than it is at the poles, and that's because there's more direct sunlight. So since the sun is so far away, all those sun rays striking the surface of the planet are pretty much parallel. And the more direct that strike, the warmer it's going to be. So at the equator, it would be the warmest. At the poles, it's the coldest. And then in between, it's just in between. Right, so you already know that. It's based on how direct is that sunlight. The more direct it is, the higher the temperatures. So that's the first step. The second step is to understand the difference between those different climate zones. Right? So you go back to your physical science days and you remember that you got that sun in the center getting orbited by our planet. And let's say over here, our planet is tilted on its axis away from the sun, and that's when we up here in the northern hemisphere are experiencing wintertime, because that tilt makes it so that that sunlight that we already were getting that was not quite as direct as the equator is just even less direct, and so it's even colder. Whereas as we make our way around to this side of the sun, we're still going to be tilted in the same general direction, that overall direction. But over here, it's going to be summertime because we're going to be getting direct sunlight, more direct sunlight. So that leads to the question, over here and over here, what's going on? Right? In both of those cases, we're not leaning towards or away from the sun. So that's when we're pretty much neutral, and that's when we have our spring, that's when we have our fall. Right? So winter's over here for us, although the southern hemisphere is having summer. On this end of the spectrum, it's our summertime. Right? Assuming that we're orbiting in this direction, this would be fall, and this would be spring. But that's just general stuff that we should already know, right? Climate is caused by is directly influenced by sunlight, And you have those three different zones. Right, at the poles, make this line blue actually. Above that line, that's where you have that polar climate where it's cold all year round, whether you're tilted towards or tilted away from the sun, no matter what, it's going to get very indirect sunlight, so it's usually pretty cold there. If you're in between the tropics, this line and this line, that's where you have that tropical zone. And it's typically warm year-round for them because even if whether the Earth is tilted towards or away from the sun, it's always going to be fairly warm. And then in between those two things is the temperate zone. And temperate zone is where you have that shift from cold to warm. And the temperate zone is where you actually experience the seasons. So make sure you understand the different zones, polar, temperate, tropical. Understand why it's warm at the equator year-round, why it's cold at the poles year-round. And then understand that we do have those two temperate zones. This is also temperate down here. And below this blue line would be another polar zone down here. Understand where the seasons happen, where it's going to be warm year round, where it's going to be cold year round, and why. All right, so that should be it.